Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into this one. All right, Auburn's got the Brady Bunch effect going. They've got so many to choose from in the little boxes, as I'll show you. Yep.
That's the way they all became the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch.
As you can see, there's a lot to choose from here. Now, I don't know how many. This guy over here, I think, wants to be there. I think he wants to be there. These other three, I'm just not certain of, but their names are very much on the list as far as ones that Auburn are considering, and they have shown some interest. So Auburn's kind of going into a situation not dissimilar to what the Tennessee Vols went through. I remember that real well, and it wasn't a lot of fun. This was during the whole Schiano mess when we had an athletic director that tried to hire Greg Schiano, and he actually wound up at Rutgers, but I believe he was the defensive coordinator for Ohio State at the time. And we wound up into a whole musical chairs deal. And what happens is when you miss on a guy or two, it starts getting real tricky. And now you got the transfer portal, which is December 5th, and that's coming up. You need to have a coach probably prior to that. Otherwise, you're going to start having guys leave, and you're not bringing anybody in. And then you've got early signing period. I mean, there's a lot going on, and timing is very important, and much more important than it was 5 years ago, for example. So let's discuss Cadillac Williams here for just a minute. Now, he's kind of a fan favorite. He's only been the running backs coach for 3 years. He played in the NFL, of course. He was a great running back, and everybody at Auburn loves him, but he just doesn't have a whole lot of he has no head coaching experience, and I think that's really the thing that's got him concerned, that he's only been 3 years coaching running backs, and being a head coach at an SEC school it's tough beans. It is very difficult. And, taking a chance like this, I think you could, obviously I think you'd take the job, but it's a heck of a risk to somebody that just doesn't have a ton of experience. But he is an option, and there are some people really pushing for him at Auburn. So we'll see what happens on that one. Now, another fella that's been getting a whole lot of publicity about the job position is Brian Johnson. And Brian Johnson has a pretty good record as far as being an offensive-minded coach, and he's had some nice success as well. He's doing great at Philadelphia as the quarterback's coach, and he has been mentioned as a possible head coaching candidate for the NFL. I'm going to pull up his resume here, just kind of give you some of his history, because I'm not as familiar with him as I am the other coaches. And you can see he started out as a quarterback coach back in 2010, which was 12 years ago. So he's been either a quarterback's coach or an offensive coordinator for over a decade now. So the guy's got quite a bit of experience. He has not been a head coach. So that's important to remember. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach at Mississippi State. Then he went to Houston, where he was offensive coordinator, QB coach again. Then at Florida for 1 year, he was the quarterback's coach. And then he became the offensive coordinator and QB coach also. Now he's at the Philadelphia Eagles, where he's the quarterback coach, and they're killing it right now. Philadelphia is really doing well with Jalen Hurts, and he is getting some buzz as being a possible head coach candidate for sure. Now, the issue there is Philadelphia is on a big run right now, and they'd have to release him. And, I don't know if they're willing to do that right now. Philadelphia is, they're heading to the playoffs, and who knows, maybe a Super Bowl berth. So I don't know that Philadelphia is going to be too cooperative on that deal right there. But he might be a really good hire. It's just hard to say. With no head coaching experience, that's a risk as well. But the guy's had a lot of success over the last 10 to 12 years, and Coach Mullen said he's a great recruiter. Now, what Mullen knows about recruiting is not that's one of the reasons he got let go from Florida, is he wasn't filling up the cupboards. But Mullen says he's a great recruiter. And I could see that. I mean, he obviously gets along really well with the quarterbacks, and you need a great quarterback in the SEC. I mean, we saw that with Hendon Hooker, what a big difference that makes. Now, here's your biggest long shot, I think, is Dabo Swinney. Now, Dabo, being in the ACC and winning 2 national titles is going to cost a lot of money. I think they were willing to go to $9 million for Lane Kiffin. They'd have to go to at least 10. And he may, let me check and see what he's making. Oh, yeah, $11.5 million. So to get him, you'd have to exceed that. So now you're talking 12, 30. You'd have to make him the highest paid coach in college. And there's probably a big buyout too. Oh, yeah, 10-year, $115 million. So there's a big buyout on that as well. So, man, that would be tough. They'd have to really pony up the dough to get Dabo. So while that would be, in most people's estimations, a home run hire, kind of a little bit out of the box in a way because he is, he's making so much money and had so much success at Clemson. There's a possibility, but, man, it's going to cost you. And he has not been a head coach in the SEC, and the SEC is different than the ACC. Ask Jimbo Fisher what it was like to go from Florida State to Texas A&M. It's a very different animal to coach in the SEC. It just is. It's tougher. It's more competitive. You don't have those easy wins on the schedule. And, I think this is the riskiest of the coaches because you're going to have to pay him an absolute king's ransom. You're going to have to buy him out or help him buy himself out of the contract he's in. And there's no guarantee you're going to win. Now, granted, the guy's had tremendous success. I'm not going to take that away from him, okay? 2 national titles is a big, big deal. So, and tons of ACC championships. But I come back to the fact the SEC, it's a little different world over here.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Now, a much safer bet would probably be, now, when I say safer, I mean you're going to pay less money. It's still going to be a king's ransom. This is a guy that had a lot of success in the SEC at Vanderbilt, okay? He won at Vanderbilt.
Merry Christmas! Dinner was full!
And he's been pretty darn successful at Penn State. He's not won the biggest games, but, I mean, they're steady Eddie. They win 10 games a year, and he can recruit. And, look, he's won in the SEC at the worst team in the SEC, which is incredibly hard to do. He whooped the Vols a couple of times.
He beat Joe Lewis's ass.
That's right, he did whoop Joe Lewis' ass.
That's right. And when you're at Vanderbilt and you beat the Vols, you've done something, especially when we were pretty darn good at the time. All right, so currently he's making $7 million a year. So, you could probably get him for $8 or $9 million, which is, about what you were willing to pay for Lane Kiffin. And he's probably as good a coach as Lane Kiffin, and he's a safe bet. This would be a very safe bet if he was willing to come. There'd be some kind of a buyout in this, I'm sure. But you're going to be dealing with that with any big-name coach. And, this might be the best bet for Auburn as far as going safe and getting a guy with a ton of head coaching experience and a guy that coached in the SEC and won in the SEC. Now, lastly, and certainly he's probably first on the list for a lot of people, is Hugh Freeze. Now, Hugh's had his problems, and that has come out big time because they were about to offer him the job right after Kiffin. He was plan B. And when it comes to coaching chops, I mean, the guy's a really good coach, and he's won everywhere he's been. But he's had NCAA problems. Now, he's won at Liberty. And prior to the news coming out about him being number 2 on the list, he was doing great. And then his team kind of quit on him because they thought he was quitting on them. Same thing happened with Lane Kiffin. Lane lost the last 3 games he coached because of the controversy, and he never put it to bed. He kept it out there because he was playing both sides, and he probably didn't know what he wanted to do. That was pretty obvious in his interviews because they were horrendous. Some of the worst interviews I've ever seen, just totally mealy-mouthed about it. But this guy, when it comes to wins and losses, I think this is a good hire. This is a guy that beat Saban twice and really knows how to handle the SEC. The problem is he has baggage. Now, that should not be that big a problem for Auburn because they got Bruce Pearl, and Bruce Pearl's killing it. But the difference is Bruce Pearl got in trouble over a barbecue sandwich up here at Tennessee and didn't tell the truth about it. And you gotta tell the truth to the NCAA or don't meet with them at all, which is what he does now, which is smart. You don't meet with them. But his baggage is more salacious, and that's not going well at Auburn. There's a lot of people that aren't happy. Now, it may be a small number of people that are really loud online, but it wouldn't surprise me if the number's a little larger than you think. Because like I said, I've got some friends up here that are Auburn fans, and they don't like him. They're not fired up about it. And actually, one of them brought up an interesting point. And he said, if you're going to throw this kind of money at it, why don't you go after a guy like Sean Payton, who's not in coaching right now, who's a great coach, would be a big-time splash hire. Now, you'd probably have to pay him a small fortune, but, if you're going to pay that kind of money, I mean, they're talking to Dabo. If you're talking to Dabo, you know what you're going to have to pay. And Dabo's people have been talking to Auburn, and that's been brought out in articles, and Dabo's not denied it. So there's so much going on with this, it's unbelievable. And for the Auburn fans out there, I'm not trolling you or knocking you or anything like that because we have been through this exact situation with UT, and it's no fun. It sucks. and you're on the clock even more than we were. Ours was more about reputation, and people were giving us grief in the national media. This is all about, hey, you'd better get somebody before the transfer portal and before early signing period, or you're going to lose another year. And keeping Brian Harsin, who was completely hamstrung that entire year, it was a total wasted season. And during that time, I told him, I said, you might as well just let him go because he's not going to be able to recruit, which he couldn't. And, you know, the team knows he's on the chopping block, and that's not going to work.
How's bragging camp going?
You've seen what happens when players think a coach is going to leave for some reason, whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily. They don't play well under those circumstances. Football is a very heady game, believe it or not, and energy level and mindset are very important. And if prime example of that, again, is Hugh Freeze at Liberty and Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Those teams were killing it, and they lost their last 6 ball games combined. That doesn't happen unless your team is losing it mentally, and that's exactly what happened. There's a lot of moving pieces. Something's going to happen in the next few days, I would think. It's almost got to, unless it's a Dabo, and then he's probably going to have to wait till after the conference championship, and it's getting dicey. It's getting dicey. And it's unfortunate that Auburn doesn't have more time, but, you know, the truth is they had a lot of time. You know, they had a lot of time to get ready for this, and they put all their eggs in one basket, which is Lane Kiffin. And he probably misled them a little bit as far as his interest and kind of backed out at the last second. I could totally see him doing that. You know, he's very flight risky and hard to really gauge. So putting all your eggs in that one basket, it's a risk. And they probably thought they had him. I'm sure they had many conversations where like, okay, this is a done deal, you know, pretty much, but it wasn't signed. And until something's signed, nothing's done. All right, folks, and that's just an update on what's going on. The 5 finalists, I guess you'd say, there may be one that comes out of nowhere, but as of right now, it looks like these are the 5 that they're focused on. And I'm still thinking when it's all said and done, Hugh Freeze will be the guy, but we'll see. You know, it's hard to say what's going to happen. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover the SEC. The Vols is my team, of course. And be sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you don't care. I've only been doing this about 4 months. I could use some subscribers. I sure could. Anyway, I hope you did like the content. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.